for a couple of years, and then I got back on it. Politics with grandchildren.
Welcome. Good evening. I'm Mary Hewson Callan. I'm the Communications Director for the League of Women Voters of the Rochester metro area. The League, as you may know, is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We influence public policy through education and advocacy, and we focus significant effort on registering new voters. Parenthetically, if you are not registered to vote, or if you have moved since the last election, please stop at the table on the far wall. We will make sure you are ready for November. Our newest initiative here in the League, by the way, is finding ways to get out the vote. That is encouraging registered voters to take the next step and actually go to the polls. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the League of Women Voters is not limited to women. We are most appreciative of men who wish to work with us on making democracy work. On behalf of all of the members of the Rochester League, I'd like to welcome you to this important voter registration training program, for which we have invited the ultimate authorities on voter registration in Monroe County and New York State. Our presenters are Tom Parisi and Doug French, the Democratic and Republican commissioners, respectively, of the Monroe County Board of Elections. We are so proud to host this event, and we are especially pleased to be able to offer a question and answer period at the end of the presentations. We request, of course, that all of our guests respect our panel, our hosts, and the League's own commitment to civil and respectful discourse. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished presenters.
Thank you so much, and we really are very appreciative to be here and be able to talk to you about this. The amount of election law reforms or changes or whatever you want to call them these days is almost unbelievable. The pace at which they've happened, the way that we're trying to implement as many as possible. We'll try to cover all of that tonight and talk a little bit about that. We do want to give you, and we're going to start off by going through the election law changes. Some of them we'll talk a little bit about as we go through, and some of them we'll talk a little bit later. What we're going to do is, as we wander through them, we'll probably stop and chat on those that aren't about registration, because what we've done is, when we get finished talking about the reforms that have been literally through both houses and signed by the governor, you'll kind of go, okay. And then we'll talk about registration kind of after we finish with that. Because the agenda, the way we saw it, is to talk about the reforms a little bit, then talk about how that affects voter registration, and so we'll put that little piece in there. We're also going to talk about paroled felons and the whole issues around that and how that works. And then kind of what you may need to tell new voters as you go out and register voters. So we're going to try to cover all four of those topics, but again, what we're going to do is start with the reforms.
I just want to thank everyone for hosting this tonight and having us come out. Like I had told a couple while we were having technical difficulties, we're here to gather information from all of you, as well as share information. This is all new to us. I was in Tom's office the other day, and his email popped up, and the state senate had passed another election law update. And I'm like, hold on a minute, let me get my pad out, and you know, what is it this time? We thought 10 years ago with the new machines was a big change. You know, after having the old lever style machines for 100 years. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what we're staring at for this year. So hopefully you find this informative, and thank you again for having us.
What we're going to try to do is we'll do this kind of as a conversation about these reforms. It's kind of the way we've always done in the past. You know, we don't like to kind of, well, I'll get up and present this, Doug will get up and present that. It's kind of, we work together on that. So, let's see, election, a year unlike any other, and that is so true. One of the first bills that was passed
Yeah, is the pre-registration. So currently, right now, if you're 17 years of age and you're going to be 18 by election day, you're eligible to register in our office. We keep it in a holding pattern, and on your birthday, it automatically you become an active registered voter. The state has changed it, and it's going to be 16 years of age come effective January 1st of next year. This is very important because we do a lot of outreach with our high schools, and getting a hold of those 16 and 17-year-olds and getting them prepared, registered to vote, and ready to go for when they're 18 is very important to us.
I also, too, and we'll talk about this again when we talk about registration, this doesn't mean 16-year-olds can vote. And believe it or not, some people have actually asked that question. Does that mean now 16-year-olds can vote? And it's kind of like pre-register is in front of the pre is in front of the register. The other thing is that it doesn't take effect this year. We can't pre-register 16-year-olds in 2019. We can't do it until 2020. This bill does not take effect until January 1st of 2020. So, and we'll come back to that when we talk about all the registration issues so that we can kind of recap on that. Oh, this is the biggie.
One of the biggies.
Yeah, this is the biggie right now, because this went into effect on March 25th of this year. And what it is, very simply, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because it's more complicated than you can imagine, is that once you register in New York State, and even if you move to another county, your registration records come with you. Okay? Now that's easier said than done, because although we feed the state board's statewide database, they really don't feed us. So what we're doing, and paper is flying all over the place, we just finished the verification mailing that we normally do in August because of the whole change in early voting and stuff. It was moved up. We did the verification mailing. We got probably 25,000, 30,000 back, which is normal. But wherever we see that they've moved to another county in New York State, we have to prep everything. And again, it's all on paper. And we have to then scan in. We have to make sure that after we scan it in and to a PDF file, we have to then lock that PDF file. We have to send the receiving county the password separately from the actual document. And we email it. I mean, people are emailing stuff all over the place. To be honest with you, this probably should have kind of come into existence over a period of time. But they figured, oh, well, once you're registered in New York State, it's easy. What are the implications of this? To be honest with you, at this given point, the big test of this is going to do when we go to affidavit ballots, because the affidavit ballot, you can, as long as you're registered in Westchester and you've moved here and you want to vote here, believe it or not, that's going to be fine. We're going to let you vote here, and we'll move you in the process. But we're going to have to find you in Westchester. So the research on affidavit ballots is going to be much more extensive. And it's ironic because the bill that Doug was talking about the other day it's a bill to take off the request from the person filling out the affidavit application to take off their previous address. Because they felt, the legislature feels, well, that's a lot to ask them. You should be able to find them relatively easy. Well, if it was just our database in Monroe County, yeah, I mean, I kind of says, yeah, but it's nice to have. But given the fact that now we're going to have to search about 12 to 14 million voters, and the potential for multiple names, I mean, multiple occurrences of the same name, it is problematic. I must confess, we did reach out to the legislature because it has passed both houses, but I don't think the governor signed it yet. So we actually may weigh in on that one because it's not a good thing to do right now. But that's what you're doing. You're looking every day at the bills that are passing.
So I think it's important. So if I'm a registered voter in Erie County and I'm registered in the Democratic or Republican Party, and I move to Monroe County. My enrollment, currently right now, you can re-register from county to county and your enrollment takes effect immediately. That is not the case right now. If I move from Erie County to Monroe County, my registration, my party, everything follows me. They haven't figured out the voting history yet, which is, that's a huge issue. A lot of people call up and they say, can I have all the voters that have voted in the last 4 general elections? And, as a prime voter, and the candidates will not be getting Doug French's name because the voting history hasn't followed me. We're going to figure that out. The statewide database is, that they're working on is going to be helpful. But it's important to know that the party does not reset when you move from county to county, that it does follow you.
A number of people who wanted to change party were thrilled because they moved from one county to another, and the party change took effect immediately. Won't be the case anymore. So, one of the little catches of this change.
I just wanted to clarify that last point you made. It used to, until this change, I could move from Erie County to Monroe County and use that as an occasion to change my party registration within however many weeks of the election day. Now that's no longer possible.
Exactly.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
You got it? This one we won't spend a lot of time on because we're still learning what this all means. The state board just put out their new manual just about a week or so ago. It's 160 some pages. We're trying to work through campaign finance, but they did eliminate the LLC loophole, and what that means is there's more restrictions now on LLC's giving and the reporting that has to be done. In the past, I think the LLC could give up to $2,500 before they had to report which partner was giving. The other thing is now the LLCs, the corporations, are restricted to the $5,000 limit that corporations are restricted to also. So but I can't give you a lot of details because we're still learning what exactly all of that means. But you need to know that there's changes in the campaign finance and that we've been seeing them. Oh, this one everybody knows about.
So in each even-numbered year, as we know, last year we had a federal primary in June, September state and local primary, and then we had the November election. Consolidating the primaries, which is something that we have, everyone in this room has been a proponent of for probably the last 6 or 8 years, at least even-numbered years. This is going to save the boards of elections, I can't tell you how much money in even-numbered years. Now, this is an odd-numbered year, and it does not help us budget-wise. However, it does set up the fact that we're getting the voters used to voting in June, away from September next year. We all know 2020, what that is going to face us with. I know that there's one section that deals with petition signature requirements, but I wanted to state that the petitions and all of the committee members that had to go out starting February 26th, and it was a rough start weather-wise, the first couple of weeks, that our office found that there was almost record number of signatures that were brought in by both sides, by all parties. It did not affect the committee members one bit. Actually, I would have to say that every candidate that ran this year turned in enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. There was some that were ruled off, but those were by technicalities. There was no candidate that went out and did not get enough signatures. So this state and local primary, I think it's going to be a task getting voters used to voting in June. This This is a primary that we are staring at. We normally have 10 or 12 different ballot styles for primary elections, Democrats, Republicans, you know, some in the Republicans in the towns, and Democrats in the city. We have 56 different ballot styles in our polling sites this year for June 25th. And that is by far a record, you know, outside of, you know, normal committee fights. That's by far a record.
Yeah, as Doug said, it's interesting because the biggest complaint we got about moving the primary up to June was getting signatures on petitions. And we kind of, I have to be honest with you, we kind of chuckled because the people that complained the most got all these signatures, so it's almost like they negated their own argument, which is really interesting. But we're moving along towards the primary. We have some issues that we're dealing with. The primary date happens to be on the schools.
The last day that school is in session.
So we've got a lot of schools we're trying to deal with. Those are big issues. But in general, I have to be honest with you, moving up the primary has not been a major issue. And so we're kind of glad to see that happening. The next reform is one that everybody's been waiting for, and that is early voting. Early voting will start the first time in the November election. It won't be in the primary, but it'll be in the November election, and then it'll continue for every election thereafter. We're working real hard. You've seen some, hopefully in the press, some stuff that we've got out there. We're trying to secure locations. We are required to have a minimum of 7 locations. I'll be honest with you, probably next year we'll have more. But this year, given the fact that we did not have this budgeted, early voting budgeted, and the cost is somewhere between $2 and $3 million, trying to have more polling places is relatively expensive. The state is giving us some money. But to give you perspective, they put about $12 million in capital out there and about $10 million in operating. The total cost statewide was about $180 million. So it was pretty much a drop in the bucket. But of course, we'll take the money and apply it to this. But we're working on how to do this. I think at this given point, we're looking for community input. You see some sites listed on our website. We haven't contracted with all of those people yet. We're working on that. Some of those sites, I'm going to tell you right now, will change. As a matter of fact, I think one already has. Yeah? But we're trying to find locations where there's good parking. They're centrally located. We've divided the county up into 7 different segments with a balanced number of voters in each segment. Particularly in the city sites, we're trying to be on bus routes. I think we listed the community hospital as one of the sites. I think we're going to move that a little bit more north and get it a little bit more over in the east corridor. We're trying to work with various leaders on that right now. But it's a real chore. In the midst of all of this, and I think the next slide, it kind of goes along with this, so I'll pop that one up. Electronic poll books. And it's interesting because there's a lot of things that people are asking questions about, and probably our question and answer session at the end will be a lot longer. I kind of ask that we limit some of the questions now. Please write them down, because we've got a lot of slides to get through and we don't want to keep you here all night. But electronic poll books will allow us to make sure that people don't get to vote twice. They vote in one, because each one of these early voting sites, early voting centers, will be able to take care of any voter in the county. In other words, if you work downtown and you want to go to the downtown site, you'll be able to do that even if you live out in Brockport. So, but electronic poll books allow us to do that. We're working on the security relative to that. There's a lot of issues, obviously, with that. but the amount of data that's transferred is very minimal intentionally. And every one of the 7 sites will have its own network, and will be connected in through a VPN through that network. So we really are working on the security of those sites. I don't know.
No, it just returning to just the early voting, and like Tom said, the e-poll books and the early voting kind of go in conjunction with each other. The 7 sites that we're trying to secure, now picture this, it's 9 straight days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That more or less takes out of the equation all of the churches, all of the town halls, all of the rec centers that have before and after school activities. So those are out. The other sites that we, city libraries, some town recreation buildings, don't have enough parking. We're looking for 100+ parking spots because we are planning on fielding 25 plus election inspectors at each polling site. So when Tom said that our budget was due last July for this year, inspectors alone, and we've lowered this number just in the past week, election inspectors alone for early voting is going to cost somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000, unbudgeted money. The money that we're receiving from the state is not money that we're getting up front. We have to front the money and get reimbursed from it. So that also, puts the burden on our office and our budget. So the e-poll books on early voting, they will have all 460,000 eligible voters on each tablet at all 7 polling sites. We also have to use e-poll books on general election day, which means we're going back to election district specific ballots like we do right now. You go in, you sign the book, and here's your ballot, because we can't have ballots in the town of Hamlin, the city of Rochester, and the town of Webster. We can't have 62, or actually I think it's 78 ballot styles in November and have thousands of ballots at all 315 of our polling sites. So we have to take the e-poll books and reprogram them on Sunday afternoon after early voting ends and before Tuesday at 5 o'clock when our election inspectors show up. So it's going to be a very busy 9 days for us, and it's also going to be a very busy 2 days leading up to the election as well.
We definitely warned the staff that don't plan on going to bed anytime between the close of polls on Sunday and the close of polls on Tuesday, or usually close of polls on Tuesday, but by the time we get done Wednesday morning. So we figure from sometime Sunday afternoon to Wednesday morning, we'll be a straight through run for us.
So, and the reason we have to use electronic poll books for general election day too is because moving from county to county, we have to post voting history from the general election within 3 days to the state, so we can research the affidavit ballots.
In other words, what happens is if somebody votes up here, they were on an affidavit ballot, we have to make sure they were formerly registered in Westchester. We have to make sure that they didn't go to the polling place in Westchester and vote. So they have to get their voting history in within 3 days, because we have to get those affidavit ballots turned around and researched so that in fact we can cast them. Because as you know, we do a lot of votes on election night. We do all the machine stuff. We do some absentees where we got requests for them early. But we hold any absentees that were requested after we printed our poll books, which is kind of going to be the same thing, and affidavit ballots. To give you a perspective, again, particularly in a presidential year, we can have upwards of 11,000 to 12,000 affidavit ballots, which our staff will have to research. I mean, in an off year, it's only around 7,000, 6,000. So it is really going to be an enormous amount of work. And again, we're trying to put together all of the process. I might mention, Monroe County has been asked by the state board to sit on a small select committee of 6 counties to develop the state regulations for early voting and the use of electronic poll books. So we are very much involved in that. So think about your questions around the electronic poll books and early voting. We'll come back to that. Kind of let us kind of run through the rest of this. We talked about the temporary reduction in signatures for petitions. They kind of did it in 3 pieces. They did it while they were carrying petitions. It was kind of funny because it like all of a sudden they reduced the high numbers and then they reduced the committees, and the committees stay reduced for next year, and then they reduced the lower numbers. They all go back to normal next year, but like I said earlier, everybody that went and collected for signatures proved that they don't really need the signature reduction. It was monumental. So, next. Okay, yeah. You want to chat with this one?
Sure. I can't say that I think that this is a great idea. If anyone out there owns a business and has half of their employees tell them that they're going to leave for 3 hours to go and vote, that really puts them behind the 8 ball as far as manning a restaurant, a store, or what have you. And I know it's all about getting the voter turnout. I completely understand that. Next year, if we have a special election, there's 4 elections. There's definitely going to be 3, and there could potentially be 4. And having employees leave for 3 hours, and it's at either the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. And I think it could be a good idea. I think they need to tighten up the rules and the timing, maybe just a little bit.
And so that you understand, and in a lot of ways, is I mean, Doug and I have often come and talk to you, and we always have a little bit different bend on things. But on this particular one, since we've now instituted early voting, I didn't feel as though this particular issue was as critical. If we were still just 1 day, I have to be honest with you, I'd strongly support that, because some people had to travel from one end of the county to the other. But given the fact that now you have 9 days of voting before this, and then you come to this, I don't think it's as, I think it kind of got on the burner before early voting, and so it's something they kind of carried with them, so it got implemented, much like actually the next one, which I'm sure everybody thinks is a great idea, and that is primary day we're open the same hours as the rest of the state. Well, I have to be honest with you, given 9 days of voting before general election day, I think the rest of the state should maybe only be open 7 to 7 or something. In other words, we should be looking at not such a long election day. It would be better on the poll workers, and frankly, with 9 days, a 10th day on the Tuesday, but I think that was also on the burner beforehand, and it kind of rolled through with the rest of the things that were passed.
And I think there's an issue. Everyone in this room, if we were going to say we're going to extend primary hours for any election, what election would it be for a primary? Presidential primary. It's our understanding any election held after April 30th of next year. Both parties have been talking about having April primaries, which would mean, in my mind, that it's noon to 9.
We miss the one that we want to have.
Now, granted, there will be early voting for 9 straight days, so that helps us out. But I completely agree with Tom. If we're dealing with early voting, I think that the hours for elections, even primary elections, should be 7 to 7. How much easier would that make our job getting election inspectors? Getting it at the polling site, and I'm sure there's some election inspectors out there, getting to the polling site at 5 o'clock, it's just psychologically, it's a block right there. Us getting in at 4 o'clock is a block, and that's only an hour later. So that would make our job recruiting election inspectors so much easier.
Okay, moving along. Again, we're back to a campaign finance issue, and that's the prohibition of lobbyists and PACs, and independent expenditure committees from making certain loans. Again, we're kind of still reading through all to understand what that is. And it's kind of, I guess you can't, it's just certain loans they can't make, which is probably a good thing, because somehow those things get way out of hand. The next thing that got, there we go. The Voter Infringement, Modernization Act. This is kind of interesting, because what this really is this is about the state board developing an online database, which we're very excited about, because what happens is we kind of use DMV, but we don't have a lot of control over that. If the state board does it, we have a lot of control, and it will change very much, very extensively how people register to vote, or how they change their registration records. It's interesting though, and because, and like I said, this will be again on our registration listing. This would not take effect. This is 2 years out. The state board has 2 years to develop it. If they get it done earlier, they can implement it. The law does allow that. But I can tell you, given everything else that's going on, it probably is going to go out the limit of 2 years.
When we talk about the state board and implementing this registration transmittal system, it's not to say that the state board does not have we have a statewide database. So if you register to vote in the DMV or through our office, the registration that we enter in goes to the state, and the state will notify if I have a transfer from Erie County, Broome County, Westchester, Nassau. So you can only register once. And the checks and balances through the state are, they have a system where they check the name, the date of birth, maybe the address, but when you put your social security number down, the last 4 digits of your social security, there's a logarithm that checks that to make sure you are who you are. And if you put the wrong number down, we get notified. We have to send you a letter to make sure that, listen, did you give us the incorrect DMV number or your last 4 digits of your social security? So there are checks and balances at the state level right now. This is improving the process, and also a big part of that is that there needs to be different language capability and the capability for someone with a disability to register online. And that's all going to tie back into the state database that they're going to spend the next year, 2 years creating.
And then the last bill that passed and was signed by the governor is the public campaign financing and the election commission. The legislators created a commission to study this, and apparently whatever the commission recommends at the end of the year, as long as the legislatures don't jump on it, will actually go in effect. So we may see some public campaign financing, and it may be interesting how this all unfolds. And this was done through the budget process, as a couple of other of these were, and I guess that this is the way that they felt they could at least get something like this on the table. There's not a lot of, there's not a lot of questions to ask about it or answer. It's kind of like whatever the commission does will then play out. But through the budget process, these are all the bills that were passed and the governor signed. Now, there is still a number of bills out there that are very likely to get through the process, or frankly have already passed both houses. There we go. The elimination of duplicate campaign finance disclosure reports. But some people now have to file with us as well as file with the state board. And so, so that process will be eliminated. We've been after that to get that done. Publishing contribution limits. To be frank with you, we already do that. We've been doing that for 5, 6, 7 years. If you go out to our website, those are all out there. They've always been out there for a long time now. So we feel pretty good about that. We're ahead of that one. The placement of ballot proposals. I don't know if the last time any of you saw where there was a ballot proposal on the back. Down in the instruction area with a little arrow. Okay, so we've already actually implemented what this bill intention is to do. Then there's this voter friendly ballot act, and there's just a number of things in this bill that they want to implement to change how the ballot will look and how it's about 12 or 13 pages long. And so we're kind of working through that to figure out exactly what the details are on that. But that actually, from what we understand, has passed both houses, but they haven't sent it to the governor yet, which and it's been actually passed for almost a month now.
I mean, the bottom line with this bill is to make the ballots as simple as possible. Increase the fonts for the candidates, do away with party logos, make sure that the instructions, that the fonts for the instructions are as clear and readable as possible. I mean, it would be great if we had larger ballots, but the simplify the process, making sure that that the names are centered and that the fonts are as large as we can program our system.
New party nomination date change. That sounds really interesting, doesn't it? Well, all it is because of the early voting, because of all of the other changes to the calendar, new parties, they could nominate so late in the process that it negated everything. So this bill is going to get passed. I believe it's actually passed both houses. Yes. And the governor will sign it because it moves that up so that that nomination by new parties. You say new parties. If you remember correctly last year, you have to have 50,000 votes to be a constituted party. 2 parties fell off. The Women's Equality and the Reform Party didn't get enough to do that. But the Libertarian and the SAM Party did get enough, and they're considered new parties this year. The first year that new parties are in existence, they don't have to go through the petition process. The party leadership can just nominate their candidates. But it was so late in the year that it negated all the work we've done to move everything back. So this bill will make that nomination process have to occur earlier.
I don't see how it's fair. Democrat, Republican, Conservative, Working Families, Green, and the Independence Party had their petitions, and they were due in April 1st through the 4th. All their candidates are designated. They're on the ballot. We're going to run the primary on June 25th. In my mind, I thought that they were giving us the entire summer to program, get everything all lined up, program our November ballot, get ready for our overseas and military voters, and to have a deadline for new parties for September 3rd. I mean, what about July and what about August? I mean, yeah, we'll take some time off, but I was really planning on getting an awful lot done to lay out the November ballot. With that many ballot styles, it's a local year. We've got 110 races. We've got 200, 300 different candidates, different spellings of names, and I mean that takes a lot of time to program. And I really anticipated working on this in August, and if the other 6 parties had to have their candidates in April, I don't see why they have until September 3rd.
You want to do the 2? Go ahead.
Okay, so the 10-day registration cutoff. With electronic poll books, it's going to make it much easier to do this. So if we have someone come in our office, and when this goes into effect, this has to be voted on by 2 different legislative bodies at the state, and then it goes to the voters. So we're looking 2022 before we can implement either one of these. So in 2022, I'm going to go out on a limb and say both of them are going to pass. And that if a voter were to come into our office a day before the election, potentially the morning of the election, and not be registered, they can fill out a registration form. We can put it in our system at that time, and as long as we have connectivity at all of our polling sites, it'll update within a couple of minutes. So by the time the voter gets to his polling site or her polling site, the name is going to be there, and they're going to be able to vote just like everyone here that was registered to vote, before that. So that's going to be very beneficial. Absentee ballots. Right now we have no excuse. We have excuse ballots. So if you are permanently disabled, if you are in the hospital for a temporary illness, if you're military, you're going out of town, or if you're a caregiver, you're eligible to fill out an absentee application, and we will send you a ballot right to your house. With the no-fault absentee, if you can't make it to the polling site for 9 straight days of early voting, and you can't make it to your polling site on general election day, and you want to vote from your house, you fill out the application, there's no question asked, we will mail you a ballot right to your house. And I think that maybe the general election hours will be lowered, decreased finally at that time with all of these options available.
On both of those issues, we've long lobbied for no-fault absentee because we believe it's another method to help increase the voter turnout. In terms of the registration, most states that have implemented same-day registration, what they've done is they do have a cutoff for their poll books, and it can be anywhere from 10 to 20 days out. But what happens is that somebody will come into the polling place, they'll vote on an affidavit ballot, but as long as they registered right up through and including election day, that vote will count. What it does is it gives the Board of Elections the opportunity to send it through the normal channels where the DMV number or the last 4 digits of Social Security are checked. There's a lot of concerns from people about these kind of things running afoul, but I can assure you that given the way that most of them work now and the way they work in New York State, they've got a lot of good protections in them, and so we really shouldn't be terribly concerned. To give you another perspective relative to this, Doug mentioned the fact that we had some changes on going through the various Senate and Assembly. They wanted to amend the law in relationship to posting sample ballots on the Board of Elections website. We already do that, so we're ahead of that game. They want to amend the law in relationship to uniform election night procedures. Actually, we had our staff go through their bill the other day. We do everything that's in there already. They want to, I mentioned earlier about changing the affidavit, not to have, because they think it's really tough to have to put your old address on there. Well, I think we're going to kind of encourage them not to do that one, but we'll see where that goes. They wanted to make, in terms of, there's certain disclosure laws in campaign finance that they're changing right now, and they want to give the Board of Elections a special ballot so that our employees, although they can use absentees now, there's a real restricted time when they can do that. It'll open it up to anybody else, similar to what they would do with the no-fault absentee. So, and that's all in hopper at the moment. So, I mean, as you can see, what we presented to you and all the stuff that's going on, in 2018, one election reform bill passed. Oh wait, it wasn't a reform bill. It changed the primary from September 11th to September 13th. That's the only election-related bill that passed in 2018. You can see 2019 has been one of those years. Also, too, we did want to point out and give the state credit. They did give us, in their budget, monies for early voting and electronic poll books. Not nearly enough, as I mentioned before. you know, about 22 million altogether between capital and operating, with about $180 million bill across the state. So it definitely didn't, but they did put something in there, so at least they were paying attention to that. So that's basically the election reform. Let's talk about the bills that affect registration, okay? To be honest with you, most of them are not going to take effect this year. The only one we mentioned earlier, and let me bring them up here. The pre-registration doesn't take effect. The transfer one, we mentioned how kind of ominous that is. That's in effect. The Voter Enfranchisement Modernization Act, that's the state board's online voter registration. And the constitutional amendment changing the 10-day, that wouldn't take effect until 22. So in a lot of ways, you're not going to have a lot of changes to the registration process. Not this year. You know, it's probably the biggest one is the second one there. And I think we kind of pointed out to you the pitfalls of moving between counties and what that can entail. But it's funny because everybody says, okay, with all this change, registration, it's a big deal, it's changing. Yeah, it's getting there, but what they passed is definitely going to take a long time to implement.
Yeah.
So, the next thing you asked about was registering felons on parole. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to kind of provide a definition of what a conditional pardon is. And so we kind of put that up there. People kind of get confused. They think that, you know, this, oh my gosh, all these people getting out of jail are automatically given voting rights. And that's not the case at all. You know, it's if you look through all of the steps there. Can I balance?
Yeah, oh yeah, sure.
I can't read much. Pardons that are issued that they lift some conditions that are normally placed on someone on parole, and they're done to expedite their re-entry into society. Anything that we can do to get people coming out of jail to become more productive members of society, that's a good thing. And to be honest with you, if they don't live up to the expectations coming out on parole, and they commit crimes or they do something again, that conditional pardon can be we've seen, very quickly revoked, and they lose that opportunity. We have a number of things, as long as checks down the side there. I don't know if you want to go through some. Conditional pardons, they're we start up here, I think.
So conditional pardons for the restoration of voter rights are considered for each person being released on parole based on their eligibility to vote and severity and nature of their crime. So currently, right now, you're not eligible to vote, to register to vote until you're off parole and on probation. And it's been like that for a long time. Now we receive documents from the state, and I'm not gonna read each one of these. It's important to know and to answer the questions that we still have the statewide database. There is a website that anyone can go and check. We get registered voters, people registering felons, and our office staff uses this website every single day. And it does get updated on a daily basis, we've found. So I think the system that's in place is working. I will tell you that the first couple of weeks that we started receiving people that were on parole, that we did have one that we received information 2 weeks after they registered to revoke them. Now, I don't have numbers on hand, but that just proves that the system is working.
It definitely is a lot less concerning than I think a lot of people thought it would be. And I must confess, the executive branch has done a real good job working with the justice folks, and making sure that what they're doing is on target, and definitely people that are committed to getting themselves back into society and to a positive movement. This definitely has been a real good thing. We've gotten people who seem to be really happy with the concept that they can register. As I said, as you see up here, that website, by the way, is open to anybody. You can go and get on that website. There's no password or anything else. You just need the name of somebody who was a convicted felon to get by the first page, because that's what you have to put in. So if you get somebody asking you, they say, I'm a convicted, do you think I can, you can actually go on that website, and when you bring up their record, it'll tell you if they have a conditional pardon or not, right on the website. So, don't hesitate. If that's something that you do, that you go out there and you encourage and work with the reentry homes and stuff like that, don't hesitate to encourage them to look it up, and there you go. You can do that, yes.
So, when someone comes out of prison on parole, their parole officer is supposed to do this with them, tell them whether they can, give them a voter form. Do you know if they're doing that?
I think probably some of them are. I'm not going to say, But with all things like that, some of those things fall through the cracks. And when they developed this process, they allowed for safety nets, and that's what we're telling you about. We could tell you that this is the way it has to be, but we don't have any control over parole officers and what have you. But what we do have control over is the ability to kind of look somebody up when they come in and not harass them or give them any more, that you don't have a certificate of relief, no problem. We still can register you and get you on the voter rolls. Yes? You got a question back there?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So they can't register to vote until they do the conditional pardon?
They can register to vote, they have to get a conditional pardon first.
Yes. But, okay. Just
Yep.
to make sure I understand the order.
And that's why the website is so important, because once the conditional pardon is issued, we have access to it. Maybe they come out and it's taken a week or so for the executive branch to work through those, and they can get back to the parole officer, doesn't see them right away. They can come in, and if it's been issued, it's right on there, which makes it really work well.
And how long is the process? Do you know about an estimate to get the pardon?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Curious.
what we know about is how to get somebody re-registered.
Okay.
How that all works in that side of it, the law enforcement side of it, I just know that I can now register somebody, and that's a good thing, and that's kind of how we work. And we don't want to hold people up waiting for a certificate of relief or a piece of paper before they can get to register to vote. Once that conditional pardon goes through, that day they literally can walk in the board, or they can come in and see if it went through. So we think, or they can go online themselves and look. And once it's there, they can do that. So we also are connected with the state board on this. So if something happens and they in unfortunate circumstances and they get revoked, they actually, believe it or not, that comes through the state board. The state board has that electronically, and we'll get notice that we'll have to cancel the voter because of that, if in fact that occurs. So the system is working. It's working very well, and we feel pretty good about it. Any other questions on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So if they, would you recommend that we, the typical league person or our colleagues here, do this?
If you want, I think everybody should be trying to encourage people, because my experience has been, and I did a couple of different reentry homes, and I must confess, I was really shocked. I did a women's home coming back in, and there were 8 or 9 women in the home, and when I talked about what the options were for re-registering, to make a very long story very short, all 9 women thought they couldn't re-register.
Right.
All 9 women could.
Right, we do.
I walked out of there with 9 registration forms. So people don't understand this at
Correct.
all. And if you have any questions about it or want more information from us, I'm gonna be very honest with you. The league has to update its brochure, but it has a great brochure on this.
Right.
At least it needs a little bit of tweaking, but you really, I would pull out the league's brochure, kind of go through, tweak for the governors now, the pardons, and that's a great brochure.
Right.
Otherwise than that, it's really clear, it's precise.
Well, the
You
re-
do this.
The reason I'm asking is because we've been reminded to be very mindful of the fact that the registration form is a legal document, and down in the lower left corner, you're attesting that everything's true
Yep.
and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, if perhaps they think they have this thing, but maybe they don't really, and they sign their little name in John Hancock, you don't want to be in a position where we're helping them get prohibited from voting for the rest of their life.
Yeah. I think as long as a certain degree of care is taken in making sure that you do your best to not, and the intent of the person re-registering is not to break the law, and there appears to be something there, nobody's gone after somebody for making a mistake in that area. Because to be honest with you, their registration, once it's fed up to the state, within a day, if it's not there, we get a cancellation on it.
Right. Yeah, the checks and balances are there, and
Yeah.
our office uses that website every day, and we're gonna stop if the person is not eligible to register to vote. We're not gonna let that registration get processed until the appropriate paperwork or the website says we can.
And so they won't be considered to have done something felonious.
Right.
By filling out the form.
Intent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on this particular topic? Okay. So, what information do new voters need?
Yeah, right. So some of this is new, some of it is not new. Currently, a person needs to register at least 25 days prior to an election. That is not new. That is still the rule. If you move within New York State and were previously registered, your new county will request the prior county transfer your registration records to the new county. We've already talked about that. That is new. That's transferring from Erie County to Monroe. If a person is registered for the first time in New York, and their party choice will take effect immediately, and we know that is true. That's not new. If a person has been registered in another county, their choice of party will carry with them to the new county. And we've already talked about that tonight, that it does not reset. The party enrollment does follow them. Party changes for previously registered voters must be in the office, Board of Elections, 25 days prior to the general election. That is not new. This is a very important one because we have a presidential primary coming up next year, April sometime, and the cutoff to change your enrollment to vote in that presidential primary is October 11th this year. So the registration form with the change of party must be in our office, not postmarked, must be in our office by October 11th.
Write down that date, because you gotta tell everybody that date, because we get so many people that think they changed the party.
But October 11th,
19.
2019, because that's not what that says.
Oh, good, you found something.
It says you have to do it before the November election.
Yes.
It takes effect after the general election.
Yes.
And it's after the general election the
But-
following year.
No. If you have it in by October 11th this
Okay,
year,
Oh, that's,
right after the general election this year,
Oh, so
your
that's
party
a-
will change.
so that is a change.
So if you change today, or if you change October,
6 months?
yeah.
So anybody who wants to vote in one of the primaries next year, we're really pushing this. October 11th is a big date. We'll probably do a lot of stuff on that as the year goes on. We get by the primary, what happens October 11th.
In all these election laws,
My brother's birthday.
nobody
would think.
wants to change that.
You would think that January 1st, anyone? I mean, the calendar year. So registration forms can be gotten from the Board of Elections in person or by mail. They are also available on the website, and online registrations can be done through the DMV. We are getting more and more through the DMV each morning. I think we're averaging 90 to 100 registrations online as we come in from the previous day. We also get between 500, 600, 700 paper registration forms from the DMV each week that we have to research. Most of them are transfers. And when Tom said we've got 20,000 returns on our verification this year, I think the number is down a little bit, and it's due to the DMVs and how updated our registration file really is. And I think we noticed in a couple of the last elections, our affidavit numbers are down, so I think the DMV is definitely benefiting the Board of Elections.
So,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you move within the state, and it says your new county is going to request the information from your old county. So how does, I mean, I understand you said that when forms came back to you, you sent information to the new county.
what
But
happens
how's the
is
new
that
county
it's
do?
supposed to be going both ways. Everybody's supposed to be trying to get in front of it.
So if I move, do I have to register to vote in my new county? And my
That would
new-
be very helpful.
And then my new, I mean,
That would be very helpful.
so if that hasn't changed.
No, but what has changed is all your registration information will follow you from your old county. In other words, your party, anything that the length of time you've been registered, all of that kind of stuff. Right now, when you move to a new county, it's a brand new registration. You get a new registered since, date, all that kind of stuff. But now you'll keep all of that. And again, with it being all manual at this point, it's kind of like the kind of processes that have been put in place have said, okay, everybody's got to be involved in this, not just the receiving counties or the sending counties, but like with us, as we get mail returns and they say they're in another county, well, the perspective is to help that other county because we know, it's like if you know something, you need to share it. That's kind of the perspective. So, or if somebody registers in your county and you know or realize due to their name and date of birth or what have you, or maybe even hopefully what they wrote on the voter registration form as their prior location, you then reach out to that county. So it's like, if you have knowledge, you have an obligation to kind of take the first step. And it just helps everybody.
And this paper trail is only until the state gets their full registration system up in the next year or two.
So, we take a deep breath, yes.
The e-poll books, sounds cool, but it scared me because your prior presentations have assured us all that we have paper backup and blah, 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 blah. And that sounds like the paper backup goes out the window. Am I wrong?
Probably not the first couple of years. There'll be something there. I don't know if it'll be paper, but it may be a subsystem that is not connected into the electronic poll books so that we can, no matter what, we can always have something there for people to sign in on. That's one of the reasons why we want to have our own networks at each one of the, particularly the early voting centers. The other thing is that we won't rely on one. I think we got a minimum of 8 or 10 electronic poll books in each one of the early voting centers.
So it's just the book, it's not the ballot.
No.
Thank God, okay.
Well, I take that back. There will be ballot on demand at the early voting centers.
Right.
And the perspective on that is once you sign in, that electronic poll book then can send a signal to the printer to print your ballot.
Oh.
But you can't get a ballot without signing in, so it's kind of like, and then the other thing it does is, I'll be very honest with you, is that it'll help our poll workers, because so often when they're in a polling site where there's multiple ballots, it really is a struggle. For some reason, you would think, you know, oh, well, it's really simple. You never get the ballots mixed up, but they do. And we've worked very hard to create, you know, an environment where that doesn't happen. With electronic poll books, what happens is that the ballot will print out on a printer right next to the person with an electronic poll book. They'll be able to grab the ballot and hand it to you. So the likelihood of you getting a mixed up ballot kind of pretty much goes away. So we kind of like that. It's a positive thing. And the other thing that that allows us to do is allow any voter in the county to go into any one of the voting centers, because we'll have all, and understand, in reality, we talked about 56, we talked about 76. In reality, because we have to keep track by election district, there is 800, and usually 812 to 815 different ballot styles that you could possibly get walking into an early voting center. And we were kind of at our wit's end of how we're going to have a big container with slots, 800 slots in it, or what have you. We would have had to do regional centers. We would have had to do where there's only 100 or so. This way we're able to have anybody go to any site and with this ballot on the next. Yes?
So it's really helpful for us preparing voters when we can have a sample ballot to show them what they'll face. And usually you don't have them ready very far in advance.
Because of the September 3rd deadline for the new parties. That's why.
So there's not going to be an improvement even with.
It'll be better because they'll have to do it by then, which means it'll be all over. You're not waiting 2 weeks to certify an election or go to court.
Right.
I would say that the judicial conventions, they've moved up. I think it's August 11th through the 18th or something, the second weekend in August. So I anticipate that talking to those new parties and trying to get their information to our board quicker than their deadline day, and probably having sample ballots on our website by the end of the second, maybe the beginning of the third week in September, barring any court cases. So that's probably, you know, a couple weeks earlier than normal.
Yeah, actually it's probably about 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
32 days.
I was hoping that over the summer we
Yeah.
could be doing it.
32 days, so did Doug.
Yeah.
You know, he was all ready. There we go.
Looking to work all summer, so.
Yeah, but I mean, that means though that we'll have them probably 3 or 4 weeks ahead of the normal schedule, which is really, I mean, we're kind of taking what we can get. You know, each thing is an improvement. I mean, we worked real hard, even with all of we're still in court, and we have ballots up on our website. It's kind of risky at the moment because there's 2 court cases specifically where they could change the ballots. And to be honest with you, we're not going to print until after the court cases have ended, which means that we'll have to actually work around the clock to get our machines programmed and everything else, because we won't have test ballots until very late in the process, like the 1st of June. So our staff will be working probably 12, 14 hours a day to program the machines, but we don't want to spend a lot of money on ballots if in fact something were to change.
I mean, the absentees had to be printed because, you know, the 45-day deadline, there's people going out of town, there's people coming in our office right now voting absentee, so those had to be printed. The court case, as Tom said, it's on the 30th of this month. If we get a decision on that either that Thursday night or Friday morning, you know, that really puts us looking at long hours. The last thing we're going to do is go ahead and print election day ballots and the affidavits that have to match the election day ballots when there's any possibility at all that they could change.
We're really pushing it as far as we're pushing it farther than we can. But
With early voting, can you explain what the ballot processing will be like? That is now, on election night, you take the cartridges out of the machine, the cartridges go somewhere, the ballots go somewhere. each night, what's happening to those ballots?
We're gonna take the cartridges out of the machine. One cartridge will go in one direction, the ballots in the other cartridge will go in another direction. We anticipate, we have what we call a clean room at our center. We anticipate all early voting bags will go to that, and there's a double lock on that door. I mean, literally kind of old-fashioned locks, literally. And we can do a triple if we want, if we have a sheriff's involved. And they'll probably go in that room. That's what we're anticipating at this point. Every day, each machine will start with a fresh set of cards. As a matter of fact, because we can't bring all the machines back every night and take them back out, every day before we open the polls, we're going to hash check every machine so that in fact we can confirm that they haven't been tampered with. The software on the machine is that which is an escrow with the state board. It's part of our security process. We believe that it's really necessary. I mean, and we may have our machines in a locked area. We're trying to work, for example, one of the things we're trying to do at Marketplace Mall is get one of those empty storefronts that we can actually put our own locks on the gates that come down, so they'll be very secure. But we're not going to take a risk. We're going to make sure that every machine is clean. They get new cards that we bring in at that time. We start the process all over again with the voting centers. So it's a situation where we want to make sure that process is clean. At the end of the process, we can then turn around and begin to read those cards, much like we do on election night. And we can actually start reading them an hour before the polls close, but we can't report them. Now, it's okay, because we'll have probably 300, we figured 372 or something like that, about 372 cards to read. And believe it or not, we believe we can read those in about an hour. So it'll be really nice because we can get all the early voting numbers in the system. It's just we can't read them ourselves, which is really neat. If ever any of you have been to any one of the clerks' areas or down to the board, when you put the cards in to read, you don't see anything. It doesn't say anything at all. Every polling site, too, at the end of every day will have to be balanced with the number of voters that came in, the number of pieces of paper that went out, what's left, what's available at the beginning of the next day. There's really strong auditing procedures for every polling site every night. So, I mean, there's a lot of steps to protect that process.
You can't report that either, just the amount of traffic?
Yeah, actually, we probably will. As a matter of fact, we'll probably be reporting turnout more actively. We're trying to look at these electronic poll books as vehicles to be able to actually do much better reporting on turnout. Eventually, if we can kind of begin to work this out, as I mentioned, we'll probably have more than 7 sites in the future in Monroe County. What we might be able to do, if we can get this all nailed down the way we see it, is we'll actually be able to tell you which site not to go to and which site to go to. This site's really busy. This site ain't so busy. If you want to go over here, you go over there. We actually may be able to kind of report that on our web in the future. Those are the kind of things we're looking at with electronic poll books. Dave?
I think these changes are really exciting. You're talking about a lot of new equipment and new procedures with the electronic poll books, printing ballots on demand, new procedures for these early voting days with your red bags and blue bags and cards and all that. 10 years ago, when we brought in the current generation of voting machines, as I recall, the process of speccing those and getting ready was years. Now we're in a process that's months. I wonder if you could tell us what's going on in Albany and how is that going and what's your level of confidence in all of that?
And I'll let Doug talk in a minute, but I got to say this because I have a technical background. What I'm thrilled about out of my mind is that nothing is changing with our current voting machines. We will continue to use them exactly as they are. We'll program ballots much the same way that we've always done. That's not going to change whatsoever. Yeah, ballot on demands are a little bit different things because the ballot is printed on the spot. But it's the same ballot. It's going into the same machine that you've been voting on for the last 10 years. That counting process will continue the way it's always been. And I want to say the only change, because it is monumental, but the only change that's really huge is the way you sign in, and in some cases, the way you get your ballot. Beyond that, how we count, when we report on election night, you won't see any difference at all, because we're using all the same systems we use today. And in essence, I guess I can say, using the same voting machines makes me feel, they're getting a little old, I'm a little concerned about, but using the same voting machines, I know them, I know how they work. I've trusted them, we've trusted them, and they've done well for us. We may have to add some machines to this, but they'll be the same type of machines that we're currently using, and we think that right there gives us a sense of security.
So we're busy working on a June 25th primary election. It's countywide. Like I said, we've completed our absentee project. We are in the middle of proofing election day ballots and affidavit ballots, and doing all of our packing and supplies. So the 25th is going to come quicker than we're anticipating. We're going to certify the election, and then at that time, all efforts are going to be going toward, getting this equipment. It all has to go out to bid. Tom and I have a meeting with the purchasing director for the county on Monday. She wants to know, when do we need the equipment? When do we need it? Our staff, we need to receive the equipment. Our staff needs to be trained. We need to learn it. Then we have to obviously train our election inspectors, the most important part. So she wants to work back a deadline from that point. How many new machines do we need? What we've interviewed, or we've had 4 or 5 different vendors for electronic poll books come in. We haven't even decided what company we're going with yet. We have someone coming in at 8:30 ES&S tomorrow morning. So Tom and I are gonna sit down with Colleen and Nancy. We're gonna pick 2 vendors, and we're gonna have them come back in and show us how their systems work again. But at the same time, we have to go out to a public bid. And that scares me to no end. I mean, what happens if the low bidder comes in and it's not one of the 2 of our top choices? So we need to talk with the vendors. We need to have them be very specific on what their products can do. So when we write up the specs, that we make sure that we get everything that we want.
We have about a 10, 12-page questionnaire the vendor has to complete.
And is the state board providing specs?
They're working with us on this, yes, and they will certify each one of these vendors.
Are they going to have anything on OGS contract?
They're trying to work.
They're trying to work.
Which
would be helpful, as long as our choices are on the OGS contract.
Yes.
Back in 2017, April, my father-in-law passed away. And last week, from the DMV, because he used to live next door, our neighbor handed us this thing that said his license was due to come up. And I'm really concerned, because not only do you have to file a death certificate, he was also on Medicaid, so I would presume both the county and the state would have known that information. So here we are 3 years later. When you talk about the state taking that over, it's just so worrisome that death, which is automated, they have to have it in a million different places, and the DMV still thinks this guy's alive.
I'm kind of curious, has he gotten anything from us? Or did we actually mark him as being deceased?
I wasn't passed anything, and I can ask my neighbor if he did receive anything.
I mean,
It would have been about 2 weeks ago that our verification would have
Gone out?
Yeah.
and because what happens is we have a message on the outside of the envelope that says, if somebody no longer lives there, or if they're deceased, please just write on the outside of the envelope, return. And that gets them removed from the system.
I guess my basic question, though, is if the state if the state umbrella can't get this information right, how are they gonna work with the felons?
I think, okay, I think you're looking at apples and peaches and grapes. I think the health department is so overwhelmed at this given point with all of the issues around healthcare and everything else that's going on, that they're lucky they're even functioning. That would be not a department that I'd want to work for. I think, you know, that, you point at that and that's potential. Whereas when you look at, for example, the kind of things that we're dealing with in terms of interface with the state registration-wise, and also to the Department of Corrections and how they function, frankly, they have their parameters are a little bit more narrow in terms of what they're dealing with. If you think about it, the population that they're working with is a little bit more narrow. And even for us, the number of people registered is a little bit more narrow. The health department, if anything, their realm, or it's really incredibly broad. And I'm not making excuses for them, but I'm just suggesting that I think that it's a really difficult environment to be in this situation. We try everything we can. We get reports from the health department relative to deceased, but we look and try to follow up locally as well. And unfortunately, to be frank with you, we've deceased some people that haven't been deceased. They show up at the polling place. Of course, they're put right back on the rolls and what have you. We don't take them off the rolls. We just kind of, we have a term that, they're inactivated, notified, something.
Resurrected.
We're very, pardon, what did you say?
Resurrected.
Resurrected.
No. I'm saying, when we decease them, we don't say they're absolutely deceased. Unless we get something from the health department relative to
Living
it.
death.
It's kind of like it's
They're not purged,
They're not purged.
They're inactive.
Yeah.
I can't think of the word.
But when it's almost like, this is a cautionary tale. It's really hard. It's really hard because you want to go. There's two different things you're trying to do here. Obviously, we don't want to see somebody that isn't deceased, and yet at the same time, the last thing we want to do is mail to people who have deceased family members because it can be very traumatic to them. And so you really are working hard to do your best. Again, the health department is just overwhelmed at this point, and again, I not an excuse, and I think we got to work this thing out, but I think it's a bigger picture relative to that in terms of healthcare and everything else. So I know that doesn't answer your question.
So are they all different? Are they all different systems that you're working with?
Yes.
The DOH and your system,
Yes,
and
yeah.
nobody?
Everybody has their own, but we're trying to learn to interface better, and that too is a little bit of a struggle. I mean, as Doug mentioned to you, we're interfacing with DMV for changes, but address changes, it used to be that you had to opt into the system to update your voter registration record. Well, to be honest with you, New York State hadn't read the federal laws too well. And in reality, you can't opt in, you have to opt out. Well, DMV wasn't ready for that, so that's why they're sending us 500 to 1,000 pieces of paper every week that we now have to go through. They're working on an automated system for that, but we have to deal with them manually. We've actually, we've shuffled staff around to do this and do that, but it's those interfaces with those other agencies. Everybody's kind of learning how to talk to each other a little bit better and what have you. But in doing that, you learn the struggles that each one of those agencies have. So I hope that kind of gives you perspective. Any other questions? I'm certainly sure we didn't answer everything.
Online registration.
Mm-hmm.
The information, first of all, I'll tell you, the local Board of Elections website, I'm on your site almost every day. It is amazing. The information that you guys provide, it's head and shoulders above every other Board of Elections I've seen in the state. You really provide great information. But
I knew that was
When you have half a million people you're trying to deal with.
to my reading, there's a discrepancy between what it says on the Monroe County Board of Elections site and the state DMV site about online registration. So what's the DMV says, yes, you can register online, and our local site says, well, not really.
You can
Today,
register
this
online
year,
as
where
long
are
as you have an account with DMV. That's the kind of the message they leave out.
Okay.
That's the problem. By the way, Doug doesn't know this, but I'm going to tell him. The state board called us today.
Okay.
They asked us if they could steal our wording on early voting.
Yes.
Actually, that was just actually probably about 2 hours before we came here, right? Cheryl Krauser called and said, she said, can we steal your verbiage?
Well, I thought I had it. Yeah, that's great.
Isn't it great?
Yep.
So, I mean, you know, I really do appreciate your comments, but keeping up a website is a real challenge, and we're constantly finding things that we have to change. We're trying harder and harder to put registration forms. We're trying harder and harder to keep up with that. One of the things that really we find difficult in the last couple of months, we've kind of tripped over, is that people like to keep links to things. And it's interesting because when you change a registration form, you change the link. Well, I had somebody saying, "You've still got on your site a bad registration form." Oh wait, no, it was an old absentee ballot application. And I'm going, where on the site? Well, this is the link. No. Where on the site? Well, it's some link that was long gone from our perspective. But guess what? But we said, okay, we'll take the link, and what we did is we took the link and we linked it to the new, because if they have it, somebody else has it, so we might as well fix the link rather than do that. But it is tough to keep up with that. I'm gonna be honest with you, it really is.
So back to the online question.
Yes.
A person can register online at DMV if they establish a DMV account.
If they have a
And then they will send you one of those pieces of paper.
Well, it depends. It depends. If in fact it's through the website, it's pretty much all electronic, so it'll be fine. If they go into a DMV and they don't opt in, the way the system's set up, if they don't opt in, we don't get electronic, we get paper.
Got it.
So,
But they can do it. It doesn't matter to them whether
No.
it's paper or electronic.
No.
They can do it at the DMV. Okay.
I mean, we'll get the paper or we'll get the electronic.
Well, if they have a license.
I've worked as an election inspector. I'm expected to do the same this year. So my mind is spinning here.
Okay, two things. First of all, we are not going to train election inspectors before the primary. The whole perspective is the whole system will change so much that to do a training class before will just confuse them, and they would have to go back to training.
Because
Unless we don't know what we're doing.
the primary is going to be the same as.
Primary is the same.
The primary is the same as it's been in the past.
Identical.
Identical.
Yeah.
No changes. And so our logic is, after the June primary, we've already begun to put together the class dates and what classes we'll have and what have you. But there'll be a lot of classes for inspectors starting in, I think, late July. And July, August, September, October, all through the summer. I often tell inspectors that if you go and ask any of the more senior poll workers, and I can say that because I fit into that category. If you ask any of the more senior poll workers what they think of electronic poll books, they love them. Because what happens is a person walks into the polling place and up to the table, and you get their name. So you kind of begin to type their name in. And all of a sudden it begins to give you a list of prospective people. You can get some more information if you need it, you know, date of birth or something like that. But bingo, you can find that person, and you hit a button.
So he's not going to. I'm not going to say no. You're at the other table.
Well, no, that day is gone.
There is no other table.
Or, I tell you what, on election day, not early voting, but on election day, they may be at another table, or they may be at another site. But guess what? When you find them, because everybody who's on our system is in there, when you find them, it'll tell you where they should go.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. There's a little printer next to the electronic poll book. You can even hit a button and hand them directions to their polling place. Or wait a minute, even better yet, I don't know if we do this, but one of the electronic poll books says you can turn the thing around and have them put in their email, and guess what? It'll email them directions to the other polling place. So, and the other thing is if you don't find them in the poll book, rather than you having to stop a minute and say, what do I do now? It'll tell you, it'll walk you through, the electronic poll book will say, well, now you need to do this. You need to give them the opportunity of an affidavit or a court order. The oath will come right up for you. I mean, all of those pieces that, right now, it's basically the manual will be in the poll book, and each step will walk you through step by step, so that it's almost like it's going to be so much easier. It's up.
But I still have to be there until God knows when.
Are you available for 9 straight days leading
Yeah,
up to
well,
general elections?
this is the next thing. You're going to need poll workers for 10 days, right?
Yep.
Including Halloween.
Pardon?
Including Halloween.
Well, what we've done is, it's
made an
funny,
adjustment there.
we made an adjustment. If you go back and look at the hours, there's a couple of days in a row that the times are similar. It's because we had, initially, when we kind of put together the hours, we kind of alternate. And then we realized we were open late on Halloween. We went, no, we're going to close about 3 o'clock on Halloween.
So what are the hours approximately?
We have to be open for 8 hours on weekdays and for 6 hours on weekends. But we also have to be open some days starting early and closing earlier, some days opening later and staying open later. So if you look on the website, we've kind of pretty much laid out the hours, and every one of the polling places will do the same hours every day. I mean, every day, all of the polling places will use the hours set for that day. Not every day they're different, but they're different for everyone.
So I think some of the election law changes that we're seeing this year may be tinkered with in the future. I think that the county boards throughout the state have all expressed their issues with finding a polling site that's 9 straight days. If you were to take Sundays out of there and just say you have to be open extra hours on Saturday, maybe that brings some of the larger churches into play. And obviously they have big meeting rooms, and here we are, and large parking lots. So I think that there could be some tinkering with some of the laws that they've passed this year. You know, there was an awful lot of pressure because, as Tom said, there hadn't been any reforms in the last, 5 to 7 years. And there was a lot of pressure on the legislators to get a lot done. I think they bit off more than they could chew, but certainly we're paying the price at the boards. But I think that we'll be ready to go in November, and I think we'll have a successful election.
I think one of the things that you'll discover, and this is what's very useful, is that we are trying to, as we develop our plans for this, putting this all in place, we're also working very hard to make sure that we know how to gather data as we do it. In other words, where do people go? Where do they come from? In other words, if this, say, we have a site set up, we think we're going to be, the way it looks now is we're going to have a site at the downtown campus of MCC, because we have a lot of parking there and we have some big space there. Well, where do the people that vote there come from? Who are they? That kind of stuff. How many people come there? What time of day do they come? With electronic poll books, we can gather all that data very easily. So our whole logic is to develop a whole plan that allows us to kind of plan for the next round. Okay, we have a lot of people here. Well, let's expand that site. And we're also we're planning this year to be able to say expand a site. And the state regulations have said that we have to be able to do it by the next day. Doug and I have decided we want to be able to do it within 40 to 50 minutes. We want to be able to add a table, two more maybe electronic poll books. I'm not going to promise we're going to accomplish that. Boy, you know something? We decided to really try hard, just to kind of and to play things in place where we have trucks out in the field. Yeah. I mean, and we've done this before in terms of the regular elections that we have now. We'll put trucks out in the field with equipment in it, so we can move them around as quickly as we have to. And you know, if we got a place that's really busy, or if we got a place that just doesn't have any activity at all going on, you know, maybe we can pull a table and some poll books and put it someplace else where it is busy. We want to really be open to those kind of things and to be able to do them quickly and effectively throughout the process. So he mentions the election law change. We're ready for change.
Right. I mean, you could be a poll worker that starts out at the Damon Center downtown, and by noon, you know, we see that Marketplace Mall that we're just getting crushed, and we move 2 or 4 election inspectors. You could end up at Marketplace Mall starting out at the Damon Center. I mean, we really want to be flexible. We don't have anything to go by other than talking with other commissioners in other states. And, you know, is early voting, is there a lot of early voting the first year? You know, we've heard conflicting reports. Some states, some counties we've talked to said that they got absolutely trounced. That the first year, the first day out early voting, lines out the door. Other counties we've talked to said the first year was, you know, kind of average, and then it picked up from there. We have nothing to go by. We have no numbers. We can't call Erie County, Onondaga, and ask them, hey, how did your early voting, you know, go the first year? So this is really unknown for us. So like Tom said, we are really trying to be as flexible as possible, so we don't look bad.
Compared to the number of polling sites there are today, how many early voting sites will there be?
So we're looking at 7. The maximum by law was set. So the formula was 1 polling site for every 50,000 registered voters with a maximum of 7. You could have more than 7. We could have more than 7 if our budget wasn't completed for 19 last July. I absolutely see more polling sites in the presidential year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So we're gonna have 7, and again, like Tom said, we have the Greece Town Hall, Penfield Town Hall, the Damon Center downtown. We have Marketplace Mall. Those are the ones that we've secured right now. To answer your question, on general election day, we have 315 polling sites.
But the idea is that these are not, the early voting are not polling sites. They're voting centers.
Right.
And there is definite difference in terms of that, and that's the concept is that on election day, you can't go to any one of the sites and vote. You have to go to your site. In the early voting, you can go to any of the voting centers and vote, which is, to be honest, it's a big difference.
I've got a question. I'm wondering if you can go to the training and then request to just work early voting.
I don't think, I mean, I think we're going to do whatever people want to do in terms of whatever makes it easiest for them. We certainly are open to that. And some people may like that because they can work 8 hours a day for several days or what have you. And I mean, we don't think that's problematic at all. I must confess, that's why I wish, though, that the, how do I put this, that the legislature, instead of expanding the primary hours, had kind of held back a little bit or what have you. I think, you know, we definitely are in an environment, and that's not to say that that won't happen, that they won't figure out that, oh, wait a minute, we don't need to be open for, you know, 16 hours or 17 hours, I mean 16 hours and on election day because people make use of early voting and what have you. So, you know, we're going to have to be flexible in that area, and so, but we still are going to have to staff polling places.
How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Some of us are getting too old for 17-hour days.
I mean, you're
I
gonna have to
understand.
have 10 times as many workers.
We're gonna have to set up a chart, a grid, and fill it in. Tom and I just the other day went down and put some preliminary numbers together. You know, how many scanners do we have? How many e-poll books do we have? how many printers do we have? Let's say that this is an 8-foot table. We're going to have one e-poll book here, one e-poll book on this end, and a printer in the middle. We've got someone manning the printer, handing ballots out to the correct person, and we've got someone manning, so we've got 3 people per table.
Yeah, have you got 6 here?
We would only have 3, and as Tom said, you could have a Democrat on the e-poll book, a Democrat on this e-poll book, and a Republican working the printer.
All right.
There's our bipartisan,
All right.
or 2 Republicans and 1
All right.
Democrat.
I mean, as long as the polling place meets the requirements in terms of balance, we'll be okay.
Okay.
But it's kind of like we got to figure it's a different world. We've got to really do things differently if in fact we're going to survive. Because it's not you just can't. It's just different. It's very different.
But you're just going to need more people.
Yep.
And backup printers.
And backup printers.
Well, I mean,
Taking that
understand.
into consideration. We saw what happened a couple
Yeah.
But that's why we're not. I mean, we're not relying on one printer in a site. With a minimum of 5 printers. So I mean, it's kind of like, a lot of the books that we're looking at, poll books we're looking at, you can actually, if this table's printer suddenly gets down, a supervisor, a technician, can come in and switch them over to the printer over there. So we'll be able to continue to keep going.
Is that procedure going to be in place on election day as well, the printing of the ballot?
On election day, we're going to have the poll book, but we're going to have pre-printed ballots.
All right.
So it's going to be a little bit different than the early voting. So if you come in and you're in Penfield 1 at the town hall, you go up to table 1 again, you sign the electronic signature, and you get your ballot, and you go over to the privacy area.
So that'll be additional training for the workers.
Yes.
I am so sorry to do this, but we have promised to wrap up by 8 o'clock. So perhaps you would join me in thanking our presenters.
We want to thank you for having us because we really want to get this information out, and this is the only way that this can be done. And we're prepared to go every place and any place.
Well, we are a mutual admiration society for sure. We couldn't be more grateful. I would like to thank also the Lutheran Church of the Incarnate Word for hosting us. Thank you, Kim, for setting that up.